All right, bring this work session to order. We're now on the record. Could we please go around and identify ourselves?
John Weddleton.
Brett Dice.
Suzanne McGrath.
Forrest Dunbar.
Tim Steele.
Pete Peterson.
Mona Browse.
Okay, because we're starting late, we'll just stick with people at the table. Eric is here, or he'll be back. Ona, would you mind giving us a presentation on the 2018 State Legislative Program?
So this is a document that we have worked with the Legislative Committee on over the last couple of months. It's gone through some revisions. It includes language requests that were included in the 2017 legislative program, some new requests, and the 2017 requests that were achieved during last year's legislative session have been deleted. So hopefully we'll be able to delete these come the end of session. But if you want to, we can go through the very short document that exists. The administration is supportive of a 2018 general obligation bond for the state of Alaska in the hopes that it will result in capital projects for Anchorage and for the state at large. Our two requests to be considered in the capital requests would be the Port of Alaska modernization project. The numbers on this page are still due to be tweaked before finalization. They're going through some small changes. And right now, the port is included in the governor's proposal for $40 million. There's some funding contingencies that are in the legislation that he has proposed that tie the capital projects to enacting a payroll tax on a temporary basis. The second financial request is funding for the alcohol and substance treatment site rebuild project. I believe most, if not all of you, went out to the Clitheroe site and toured recently. This is the proposal to redevelop that site to include up to 200 beds of varying substance abuse treatment opportunities. There's a lot of background information that goes into that, and we're hoping that legislators who are interested in that will pick up the very large binders and delve into them. The next is the state operating budget requests. These are standard requests from DHHS that go in to fund the Alaska Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Intervention Program, also known as ADVSAIP, which is a program that is located here in Anchorage but serves the entire state of Alaska, which is why we advocate for funding from the state in order to do it. It's the only program in the state that does the work that it does and prevents a lot of additional tragic behavior. The Human Services Community Matching Grant Funds, that's money that goes into MOA's accounts in order to fund the programs that DHHS supplements. It's a long list of different grantees. We can get the list for you if you're interested in seeing it, but it's included in budget documents that you approve. The language requests for legislation, the community dividend program was included in the 2017 request. This is the administration's idea to sort of enshrine municipal assistance and revenue sharing in a way that communities can count on, as opposed to the way that it is currently calculated. It would be much like a permanent fund dividend for communities as opposed to individuals. It is not a new idea. It has been around for quite some time.
Ona thought it up.
Yes. There are other financial language requests. One is the statutory interest rate paid on property tax refunds. Right now, it's mandated at an 8% refund, which is pretty significant. And our municipal manager thinks that that's a little extravagant given I'm not sure when the last time, or if it has ever changed from being put in at 8%, but we think it would be better to follow interest rates.
En overuse af uktyvt, men 8%.
Yes.
Overuse.
Yeah, yeah. The electronic publication of real estate foreclosure lists. This is something from our real estate department that They believe will expedite their process and also save the real estate department money. The Department of Revenue information sharing regarding marijuana tax. We share state databases with the municipality and the state on various taxing programs. They do not currently have it set up for the marijuana program, and our treasury and municipal manager believe that that would be grateful, but greatly beneficial. Support for House Bill 176, which was a bill that was introduced last year by Representative Fansler. It increases the amount of Medicaid reimbursement eligible for emergency transports. So we currently are not able to collect as much money as we could because this state law exists. We need to change it a little bit, and we would be able to recover additional funding. And the decreased limitations on enhanced 911 surcharge was also on last year's list. That is just being able to increase the amount that is currently eligible to be charged to cell phones and that we collect to run the 911 program.
Okay, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so on this last item, the 911 surcharge, what dollar amount are we hoping to raise that to? $3, $4, $5? What's the limit that we're seeking? Do we know?
Lance knows more about this one than I do.
I can jump in. I can tell you that even at $2, the state cap is at $2. Previously, we were at $1.50. We modified it so that we could use the cap. Even at the cap, based on the revenues that we receive in 911 charges, it still does not pay completely for the services that we provide. We could tell you what the gap is, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Weld.
You know, following up on that, there's a number of these where we say change it, but it seems to me to be more effective. You know, we would like it to be $4. We would like it to be prime rate plus 1% or something. That gives them a starting point.
And we can look into those numbers if that's
I don't
something
know
you
that
would
you have
like
to do
to
those
see.
numbers. I'm just throwing
Mhm.
something out, but just
Well, I mean, what's the justification for having any kind of cap? I mean, municipalities could have local control, and we're not going to raise it too high, or we would, hear it from the voters. Why does the state feel the need to constrain us in this way?
And that could be one of the reasons that you wouldn't offer a maximum that you would want it to be. Is this is the starting point of a conversation of, well, what do you want it to be? Well, we think we should be able to make that decision on our own.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of state law that exists currently that limits municipalities and local governments to do what is best given their geographic location, their needs, whatever their tax bases are. So it's, a back and forth between the state and the local governments to figure that out.
Sure. Anyone? Other questions? Comments, Mr. Weld,
well, I
please.
guess, I mean, so we send this in and it doesn't just go in a box and we're quiet. We send this in and we have lobbyists that go and
Yes.
find whoever's in charge of the committee and
Yes.
they have these conversations. And then
All of that happens. We send it to all members. We focus on the Anchorage Caucus members. We follow up with them, make sure that they understand what all the requests are. We have meetings with each of those legislators and let them know what our highest priorities are. There's always some give and take on, well, if you had to pick one, what would it be? We don't have the one yet. We haven't decided on that. But the mayor travels to Juneau and does advocacy. The lobbyists are stationed in Juneau and do that work. We have constant back and forth. We have a little bit of a different plan this year where we will have written updates at the request of the legislative committee during the last meeting. There was a request, I believe, from Mr. Dyson that was, can we get some information on a regular basis that lets us know what's going on so that there is more communication coming in from Juneau for the assembly. It's our intent to make sure that that happens this year. And then it, slowly progresses until it's not slow anymore and start chasing everything we can. But there is constant activity from January to April, unless it goes longer.
Is that good, John?
Yeah,
Mr. Dyson?
thank you.
Mr. Dyson? Do you have a question, Mr. Dyson?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry I'm slow. I sometimes want to think before I talk.
What novel concept?
Yeah. Yeah, so the easiest way to take care of all these kind of items is to get the governor's office to do it. And if the things are in the governor's budget, then it's effort to get them out. Getting them in is order of magnitude more difficult. So what have we been doing in the last couple of months to get the governor's office on board with what we want or think is logical?
We had a number of meetings specifically on the port request to make sure that we were included in a package should they have created one, which they did. So there was back and forth with their OMB and the governor's office to make sure that we were a part of that conversation. We have a very good working relationship with the governor's office, and we plan to continue that. Some of these are things that they may push to the legislature to enact, but the dollar figures are the ones that are most helpful from the governor's office. So we go to them to talk to them about it. We've had the conversation with them about Clitheroe and the substance abuse treatment redevelopment center. There is some interest in that, and we plan to pursue both of those items, the port and the treatment campus.
When does the I've forgotten, you remember Peter, when does the governor publish his budget?
It was published in December.
That's what I
It has to be out by the 15th of December.
Yeah, so I would hope that we were, 50, 60 days out ahead of that to try to get this stuff into.
Probably 30.
Yeah, I never wait till the last minute on my things. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jessen. Mrs. LaFrance?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Dunbar. In yesterday's Transportation Committee meeting, we talked a little bit about transportation network companies and how we don't have any local control because that's all with the state. I mean, is that something we might want to consider including here for
Absolutely.
a legislative
This is, I mean, we work through the legislative committee, and then we bring to the whole body whatever amendments that you're interested in. You can let us know what they are. We will choose to incorporate them or not, depending on what they are, but there is an amendment process available
Okay.
for this document.
And so what is that amendment process?
It's normal. It'll be introduced into the,
I see.
agenda, and then you
Okay.
can.
Got it, thank you.
Let's see, Mr. Peterson, then Mr. Weldon, Mr. Dyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this planning to be laid on the table for the meeting on Tuesday? Thank you.
Mr. Weldon?
I guess following up on that, how would you do it? Because I think we hit a number of things like, I think afterwards, some conversations with insurance for the TNCs and some justifications. Look, we were told to have hands off, but we have issues with insurance, we have issues with where they're operating and so on, curb hails and how do we control that? So would that be out of your committee, or are you going to write something up?
I think, I don't know.
The way we've done it in the past is whatever the body seems, I mean, we've taken amendments from Mr. Croft, from Mr. Dunbar, I believe Mr. Evans. We do it as a relatively informal conversation where I'd be interested in seeing this, and you can bring either Dean or the legal department will draft changes, and we insert them into the document before it's approved.
To answer your question about my committee, I don't think it needs to go through my committee for that kind of amendment.
I guess I said that because you know the most about the week. If you were to give a rationale.
Actually, I think that Pete and Suzanne might know the most because this has been a very active conversation at AML, I believe, right? The need for some form of local control. And perhaps we can leave that language a little bit vague, but
Yes.
we need to restore some form of local control over this industry. Okay. Do you have a follow-up to that, Mr. Weldon?
Well, we got a email from, I think, many of us, from Donna Robertson. She's on the city council in Homer, and she was subject to a recall last year, and she said, she survived, and just kind of what happened. But she said in the course of doing that, and going, this thing is so vague, no one really knew. The people looking for the recall and the people defending themselves didn't really know quite what the law meant. So they have a resolution from their city council saying, hey, take a look at this and make it make more sense. So is that the kind of thing we could put in here too? It's just like, take a look at the recall law and
Yeah.
tighten it up?
It can be as specific as we need it to be in order to start the conversation. What happens usually is we start with this document and then the constant communication with the legislature results in language that is agreeable. SB 100 that passed last year was a lot of back and forth between our administrations throughout the rest of the state. We coordinated with Juneau and Fairbanks and the other ones. There were probably 5 or 6 cities and local governments that were all involved in the changes that were made because it affected all of them. So we sort of take the lead of AML and do some outreach into the other communities who are also interested in those changes, because we aren't the only ones who would like to see most of these things.
Can I ask a process question first? Ona, so you said it's going to be laid on the table and put on the agenda on Tuesday. Does that mean the amendments happen on Tuesday, or is it going to have public hearing on the 23rd?
I think we can do it either way. In the past, it has just been introduced and passed out as an AM.
Okay.
So we can introduce it for a public hearing if that is your preference.
Well, it's not the public hearing that I'm as concerned about as giving people adequate time to draft amendments, and right now we've only got
Right.
4 days.
And if you're concerned about that, we can postpone until the 23rd. The legislature will be in session for quite some time.
Yes. Mr. Welton, you have a follow-up? No, I've got Mr. Dyson, Mr. Peterson.
Well, I can understand we would put this on here, but in some regards, if we put something, I just say that recall thing, are we making a statement as assembly that we support that? We're not saying what a certain change would be, I guess. I mean, in some ways, it's a resolution. You know, we had a resolution, we want there's change in a certain way.
The document usually comes as a legislative program from the administration with the approval of the assembly. So it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is included as supported by every member of the body, but input as well.
On that subject,
Yeah.
when we had our AML conference in Haines this summer, I believe it was 3 of the Haines assembly members were up for recall during the time we were down there. And so I had conversation with one of them, and they were saying what John had mentioned, and was similar to what the lady from Homer was mentioning in her email, that the statute for recall is so vague that you can be recalled for pretty much anything. I mean, basically for nothing. As long as they go out and get the signatures, you know, your name's on the ballot for recall. And so AML felt that there was definitely room for improvement in that statute as well.
Okay. Mr. Dyson?
Yeah, thank you. So did the governor's budget, that was published on 15 December, reflect any of our requests?
The Port of Alaska is included in his budget.
Something like what we asked for?
Yes.
$7 figure.
Yeah. Is Wendy
Well, not
Chamber?
I mean, it's $40 million. We would appreciate if the state gave us $300 million, but yes, it is reflected in there.
Is Wendy Chamberlain our lobbyist?
She will be one of them, yes.
Who's the other one?
We're finalizing that right now.
Yeah, so-
You'll see those contracts come across shortly.
Yeah. I commend that choice. Wendy is very good, very knowledgeable, very credible, and from my perspective, has a lot of integrity.
Yeah, she has worked for the municipality for a very long time, and we have
I remember that
kept her on.
well. I'll have another one, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I was going back to the Clitheroe, the substance rebuild project. Do we already have some funds on hand for that?
There is a current grant that is being expended for the planning of the redevelopment. So, you know, you get a little pot of money to do the work up front and develop all the plans to actually go into capital construction. So that has been part of the process in order to get to where we are now.
So we just had design money, basically?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Weddleton?
You know, we might help our sales pitch here, because we have that money, you could mention that here, but also we would provide the land essentially So maybe some one sentence here, employee prepared to provide in-kind value of valuable land, 50 million itself. Something.
Yeah, can we do that kind of small amendment without having to formally propose it on Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay.
Or is that land part of this 52 million and get money for it?
So,
That would be better.
I'm going to read, and we've had this conversation a couple times, and I continue to be unable to think of a better word, but I continue to believe that modernization is the wrong word for the port project, because it's not, doesn't really, yes, we are modernizing the port, but I think the word modernize doesn't have quite the, doesn't have the necessity, or it doesn't convey the necessity of repairing and basically saving the port as a functional asset.
Exactly right.
Yeah, so if we can think of something like,
Fix
port,
the damn thing.
yeah, or like port non-destruction project, whatever it is.
Critical improvements.
Yeah,
I think that is a good thing for the Enterprise and Utility Committee to address.
I have made this pitch to the port director several times, and I think we just haven't thought of a better word. But if anybody has one, to convey that this is not a want, this is a need.
It's been a need for how many years?
Several, many. Are there further thoughts or comments or questions, Mr. Dyson?
Yeah, so I tried to listen carefully. So the administration is going to take a team to Juneau to work on these issues and make presentations to legislators. I'd strongly encourage that all happen before the end of the second week of February.
The intention, in the past, we have gone in the last week of January, and then again in the second or third week of February, and then, if needed, further into the session, more.
Yeah. And so you said the administration, does that mean assembly members won't be a part of that team?
They have not been a part of the team the team is, the mayor and myself going down. When we go down for AML in February, we do, the lobbyists have helped the assembly members in meeting with the legislators that they are looking forward to meeting with, or that we feel need additional information in order to make decisions about what Anchorage needs. But I think we can talk about it.
So I made that suggestion both to this committee and the mayor. And I'm not surprised that nothing has happened with it. I also suggested that much of this work of working with the legislators, particularly key Anchorage ones and ones that are on the finance committee, should have been happening the last 2 months and hasn't. And I've raised a lot of teenagers. I'm used to being ignored. But if it was me, my message to the state would be, we in Anchorage get to deal with statewide problems, particularly the social problems. This is where the treatment happens. This is where much of the folks that are released from jail, all that kind of thing, probation, the court situation, all of that happens here. And we are dealing with, I suspect, all those social problems, some percentage, more than 50%, are statewide issues that we didn't cause, but we get the privilege, if you will, of having to deal with all those imported problems. And I can't think of a stronger argument for municipal assistance and revenue sharing, because we are serving much of everybody else's problems. And I just think that's an absolutely accurate analysis and ought to be a very strong part of our presentation of why the state needs to step up to the statewide responsibilities that we have to pick up the pieces of. And I made that argument that strong to Ethan and to our own legislative committee, and I can't imagine not doing that for what it's
And it
worth.
is the Port of Alaska.
Sorry?
And the port is the Port of Alaska.
Sure.
So we need to speak that frequently.
I'm going to ask one question, and I'll come to you, Mr. Peterson. So, the school district also has a number of asks, right? Do we do any coordination with them? And one that I know that they've been talking about is trying to rebalance the way the BSA is calculated, where now we are basically discriminated against the city versus the valley. Do we work with them at all, or are they sort of on a separate track?
I don't know if this has happened as of yet, but Wendy Chamberlain is also their lobbyist.
Okay.
So the coordination between the two bodies does occur, and we are supportive of them and have been called upon to testify on their behalf in various legislative hearings, and so we do track what they do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the last several years, I've been going down and meeting with legislators myself, bringing the Anchorage legislative package with me and having discussions with them individually. If members of the legislative committee would like to go as a team, so we could go to 2 or 3 of us to the office to talk to legislators, I'd be fine with that as well.
May I respond?
Yeah, Mr. Dice.
My experience, which is considerable, is that going around to people's offices to get an appointment, sometimes you'll get a chance to talk to the
Yeah,
guy.
I usually
The
get stuff.
very key people, particularly the ones on the budget committee, are so buried. What you're gonna end up often is doing to a staff member who will smile and write down notes and pat you on the head and say, thanks for coming by. That means squat. And AML, I don't know of any legislators who were ever influenced by what AML had to say, and going down to be a part of that is a nice thing to do, you know, and you can go drink at the Baranoff Bar, but just not effective in terms of resources. And I hoped that the mayor would include key members from this assembly who have key contacts there and so on to be a team approach and so on. And politics and party labels do play an influence. And just another group of people, you know, all of the same party with their hand out doesn't build credibility. So, I mean, that's wise, thoughtful comments. And, yeah, so I'm sorry that it hasn't worked.
Well, I mean, I guess on that, Ona, if, for example, Fred were to go down to Juneau at the same time that you guys would you and the mayor be open to having any joint meetings?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Of course, we have to go down on our own dime.
right.
Yes. But for the good of the order. Other, yes, Mr. France.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. There are many areas clearly that could be included on this, I mean, without, right? And so one question, Ona, did you all discuss including any funding for Tourniquet Arm policing grant money?
What I
on
will
here
say
under
is
public
that
safety?
this is not a limited document. This is not the only thing that we talked to them about. Legislative programs in the past have been 70 pages long because they are thick with capital requests district by district. The state no longer operates that way, so when we came into office, we decided that that was something that would be ignored, and to make it as focused as possible. But that is a good recommendation, and I will talk to the mayor and the municipal manager about that.
Or we should come up, oh, excuse me. or
No, go ahead.
We should propose an amendment then
Yep.
on Tuesday.
You give them- Okay.
That you, John, 'cause you're the-
Practice makes
Are there any other comments or questions?
Get 400,000.
Seeing none, I think I will close this work session.